Okay.
It is safe to say that Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' graphic novel Watchmen is one of the most successful comic books of all time, being listed as one of Time's top 100 novels and having never been out of print since its original 1986 release. Heck, if you were to Google bestest comic book ever of all time, Watchmen is suggested as one of the first results. Furthermore, it has inspired several adaptations into both film and TV, some less, well, received than others, as well as other spin-off comic story runs. But even beyond its economic success, Watchmen is often cited by fans of the comic and superhero genre as having changed the game of the medium as a whole, with its analysis of the superhero fantasy and iconography, inviting scholarship, analysis, and Reddit threads by nerds everywhere. And it's no wonder. I mean, look at it. She thick. With themes of religion, politics, economics, sexuality, and power, Watchmen is an incredibly rich text with a nuanced and unique cast of characters. Of all the characters, there is hardly one as instantly recognizable as the iconic Dr. Manhattan, who I wish to turn my focus on here in this video. John Osterman was seemingly killed after getting accidentally caught in the test chamber at the experimental physics lab where he worked. However, over the course of several months, Osterman was able to rebuild himself, having gained power over all atomic and subatomic particles. This means that he can grow, shrink, move objects with his mind, disintegrate anything. There's seemingly no limit to Dr. Manhattan's powers or control. But most importantly, Dr. Manhattan possesses the unique ability to view all events outside of their usual flow of time, experiencing everything simultaneously. One major theme that one could analyze regarding Manhattan is that of religion. Multiple times throughout the story, characters refer to Manhattan as a god. One can view his transcendental powers as being godlike. His ability to build himself back from the dead can be read as a Christ-like resurrection. In his personal chapter, he describes his relationship with his father, a clockmaker. This can be read as further reference to Christ and his own father, as well as the clockmaker occupation being a reference to the common deist understanding of God as the universal clockmaker, setting the universe running. However, when we look at these moments in which characters refer to Dr. Manhattan as being godlike, it is always in reference to his incomprehensibility and the uncertainties of the implications of his very existence in their world. The one line that stood out to me most wasn't from the central comic itself, but rather from one of the appendices. At the end of each chapter, there is supplementary material that exists to contextualize the history of the world and characters of the main narrative. These take the form of, for example, memos from Vite Industries, an article on ornithology by Night Owl, and one such appendix is an excerpt from the autobiography of the original Night Owl. Here, he recalls his meeting Dr. Manhattan for the first time. He says, "I personally found Dr. Manhattan to be a little distant. Maybe that was more my fault than his, though, since I found it very difficult to feel easy around the guy, even once I got used to the shock of his physical presence. It's a strange feeling. The first time you meet him, your brain wants to scream, blow a fuse, and shut itself down immediately, refusing to accept that he exists." To Night Owl, the experience of meeting and seeing Dr. Manhattan is akin to experiencing the Sublime. In Philip Shaw's book, The Sublime, he defines the sublime as follows. Sublimity refers to the moment when the ability to apprehend, to know, and to express a thought or sensation is defeated. Yet through this very defeat, the mind gets a feeling for that which lies beyond thought and language. Some Romanticist-era poets, Shelley, Keats, Wordsworth, and Coleridge, who were inspired by Kantian philosophical frameworks of the sublime, would try to label this feeling as being from a different world or sphere, some possibly attributing this feeling to God and heaven. While the where it was from would vary, the nature of its experience would be resonant, leaving the poets fearful, awestruck, and unable to describe what had been fleetingly and overwhelmingly felt. Returning to Watchmen, the way Night Owl describes experiencing Dr. Manhattan reminds me of the recounted experiences with another Sublime literary character, that of the monster from Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein. Those who experience the monster are specifically put off by looking at his face, as they experience a visceral feeling at its wrongness, otherness, and ineffability. Like Dr. Manhattan, their mind is unable to comprehend it. Sublime representations in literature can be read as tied to anxieties of forces that feel beyond human comprehension. With Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's monster, as a sublime entity, it can be read as relating to anxiety surrounding parenthood, birth, and interpersonal connectivity, but more especially in light of the possibilities of science and modernization. If we can artificially create life, then what's left? In this understanding, we can relate Dr. Manhattan to the anxieties of the atomic age, with his name and powers being tied to the atomic bomb, and his role in the narrative being linked to the mounting tensions between nations, and it's no wonder that the people of the Watchmen world would feel such complex and ineffable emotions in light of Dr. Manhattan. In a world where the oppressive presence of the doomsday clock haunts every waking moment, and seemingly every panel, where nostalgia is a commodity and the good old days, which were not so good after all, it seems, are also drifting even further out to sea. Even the automobile is going to go, according to the good doctor. If this is progress, then what's left? If the sublime is a force that works beyond the mantle of our human comprehension, then an understanding of Dr. Manhattan as a sublime force is very apropos. Manhattan, through his perception of time and space, is able to work and think beyond the framework of linearity. We see as his perspective shifts from moment to moment, as he calmly announces that which is yet to come to pass, as he experiences it simultaneously with his own history. He is at a funeral. It is the Vietnam War. He is holding a glass of cold beer. He's dropping bits of gears and clock components. He's picking up a photograph. He's holding a woman's face in his hands. He's dropping sand. He's holding a woman's face in his hands. He has died. He is reborn. He is on Mars. Every emotion he has ever felt or ever will feel is predetermined. One might even say that the future is already written in a graphic novel. When Dr. Manhattan says, "We are all the puppets, Laurie, and I'm just a puppet that can see the strings," he can see the comic book. He can see us. In no scene is this more clearly spelled out than when Laurie and Manhattan arrive to confront Ozymandias. Here, we see Manhattan literally speak to Laurie, confirming her understanding of the situation by reaching out from the future. As we, the readers, turn the page, we manifest his reaching across the flow of the narrative with our page turn. Manhattan's transcendental powers are made possible through us. When Manhattan speaks through a literal page turn, he aligns his perspective with our own. His two-dimensional illustrated world is made three-dimensional through us, the reader. In their article, Confronting the Fourth Dimension, Mark Bernard and James Carter describe this dimensionality by saying, indeed, the true genius of Dr. Manhattan is that he seems to be a metaphor for the art of the graphic novel in and of itself, as well as for the graphic novel experience. He is everywhere, all the time, as well as where he is presently. He is not most like any other character in the book, but most like the reader himself, in that he transcends transience, simple being, via not displacement, but multi-placement, of being many places at once, mentally, and in the storyline physically as well. His character is the fullest, most essential fourth-dimensional relationship in the genre to date. Comics is a medium that lends itself well to reflexive analysis. As a tangible medium, you hold it in your hand. and therefore the literal physical barrier between art and reader is torn down. It is understood in comic reading that there is an immense power utilized in the page turn. Not only does it control suspense and pacing when well utilized by the writer, but it also forces the literal engagement with the reader. With this in mind, it is no wonder that the characters of Watchmen cannot comprehend Dr. Manhattan. He is, quite literally, thinking and operating on another plane of reality that they are not even aware exists. Or if they are aware of it, they cannot describe it, for it is sublime. He is an insertion of our reading sublimity in the perspective of the narrative. Ultimately, the characters in Watchmen are living in the shadow of us, in the shadow of the sublime Manhattan.